Everyone laughed when Emily Carter buried 9,000 fish bones under her orchard. The first trucks slowed on the red dirt road before breakfast. By noon, 3 neighbors had stopped beside the fence. By sundown, half the county knew that the quiet 18-year-old girl who had taken over Carter Peach Farm was dragging sacks of fish bones between the rows of old peach trees. The sacks were wet at the corners and smelled like bait buckets and low tide. Emily opened them with her pocket knife, poured pale bones into narrow trenches beneath the trees, then covered them with composted manure, rotten leaves, straw, and soil. Nobody understood it. A girl already behind on her banknote was supposed to be buying fertilizer, spraying chemicals, or selling before the place collapsed. She was not supposed to be burying fish waste under the last orchard her family had left. Carter Peach Farm had once been famous in the county. In July, families drove out for baskets of peaches, so sweet the juice ran down their arms. Emily's grandfather had planted the first trees. Her father had built the packing shed and painted the sign by the gate himself. But by the time Emily inherited it, the farm looked tired. Her father's heart trouble had eaten through 3 years of money and strength. Hospital bills turned into late payments. Repairs were missed. Seasons failed. The orchard soil had gone pale and powdery. The fruit came in small and hard. The old tractor smoked every time it started, and half the irrigation lines leaked before water reached the trees. The banknote sat on Emily's kitchen table in a white envelope with her name typed across the front. A developer from Atlanta had already made an offer. It was enough to pay the bank and make her leave. The banker called it practical. Some neighbors called it mercy. Emily called it giving up. So she stayed. She fixed fences with baling wire. She patched the packing shed with scrap tin. She sold her mother's old sedan for fuel, pruning blades, and soil tests, and when the fertilizer quote came back higher than she could afford, she sat at the kitchen table, opened her father's old notebooks, and began reading. That was where the fish bones began. But no one in town cared about the reason. At Miller's Feed and Supply, men by the coffee pot said her father would have known better. At the diner, people lowered their voices when she walked in, then started laughing as soon as the door closed behind her. Someone said she was turning the orchard into a fish graveyard. Someone else said she would lose the farm by harvest. Then Mr. Whitmore from the bank drove out. He did not arrive like a villain. He arrived like a man carrying numbers he wished were softer. His dark sedan stopped beside the orchard gate, and for a moment he sat behind the wheel, looking at the trees as if he remembered them from better years. When he stepped out, his polished shoes sank into the damp red clay. He reminded Emily that the orchard was collateral. He reminded her that the note had already been extended. He told her that if the land lost value, the bank would have fewer options, and so would she. Emily pushed her shovel upright and asked him whether a dead orchard was worth more than one somebody was still trying to save. Mr. Whitmore looked toward the gray limbs, the sagging barn, the farmhouse roof patched in tin. He told her he had no authority to gamble with depositors' money. He told her selling before foreclosure would hurt less than being forced out after it. For a second, Emily wanted to show him everything: the journal page, the soil notes, the row map, the plan. But she knew he did not need explanations. He needed proof. So she scooped pale soil from an untreated row and let it crumble through her fingers like ash. Then she pulled back straw from a row she had amended a week earlier and showed him the darker, damp soil beneath it. He looked longer than she expected. Not convinced, not impressed, but not laughing. Emily told him she could not pay with promises. She could only pay if the land produced. Then she asked for 1 season. Mr. Whitmore said the bank could not wait forever, but he would hold off recommending foreclosure until harvest, as long as she kept him informed. It was not kindness exactly. It was not faith. But it was time. After he left, Emily went back to digging. Her father's notebook had led her to a page from 1987. In it, he wrote that her grandfather once buried fish scraps beneath young peach trees, mixed with leaf mold, manure, wood ash, and straw. He believed fish bones fed the soil slowly, with phosphorus, calcium, and minerals that roots could reach over time. He believed dead soil needed more than a quick green-up, it needed life returned to it. Emily did not copy blindly. She watched the orchard like it was speaking. The weakest trees stood where the ground turned gray after rain. Earthworms lived only near the old fence line, where leaves had piled up for years. Rainwater ran off the bare rows instead of sinking in. Trees with deeper mulch stayed green a few days longer. She read old soil conservation pamphlets and extension bulletins. She learned that organic matter could help soil hold moisture, that calcium strengthened fruit, and that phosphorus helped roots. She did not have enough money for the modern version of saving a farm, so she reached backward. She hauled fish bones from a processing plant 3 counties away, waste they were happy to give her. She buried them deep, mixed with manure, leaves, spoiled hay, and wood chips. Every row got a note: date, soil depth, moisture, bud count, leaf color, mulch thickness. Then the county agent, Mr. Hanley, came to inspect. He arrived in a clean white truck with printed recommendations on the passenger seat. He did not mock her, which almost made it harder. He asked about application rates, pH, nutrient imbalance, scavenger damage, and nitrogen tie-up from all the straw. His questions were not cruel, they were precise. Emily respected that. Good intentions could still hurt land. But when he pointed to a printed nutrient schedule, Emily looked past the paper to the soil beneath his boots. She asked why the same measured inputs had left the south block weaker every year. Then she showed him. She dug a slice of soil from the south block. It broke apart into pale dust. Then she walked him to the old fence line and dug again. That soil came up dark, damp, and threaded with roots. Mr. Hanley watched her crumble both samples in her hands. The county recommendation saw 1 orchard. Emily saw high ground, low ground, weak rows, sheltered rows, old injuries, and places where life still clung to the edges. Mr. Hanley told her observation mattered, but testing mattered too. Emily told him a lab report would not show how water ran through the orchard during a hard rain unless someone stood there and watched it. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he gave her 2 soil sample bags and told her to send one from the treated rows and one from the untreated rows. He also told her to keep better records than her father had, because if the plan failed, she needed to know why, and if it worked, no one would believe her without numbers. Emily took the bags. After he left, she wrote down every question he had asked. Some worried her, some improved her plan. That was the difference between mockery and doubt. Mockery closed a gate. Doubt could sharpen a blade. Spring came cold and uneven. Emily walked the orchard before dawn, checking blossoms for frost burn. She lit smudge pots and watched smoke drift between the rows while the county slept. Nothing changed overnight. Some trees looked worse before they looked better. Raccoons dug at 2 trenches. The tractor died in the back row. The smell lingered after rain. Men leaned from trucks and joked about fishing for peaches. Someone hung a rubber fish on her mailbox. Emily carried on. Then came the April night that nearly broke her. Rain hammered the farmhouse roof. Water dripped into a pot on the kitchen floor. Emily sat at the table with her father's notebook, Mr. Hanley's soil forms, bank notices, and grocery receipts spread before her. Every number looked small alone and impossible together. Fuel, soil tests, interest, tractor parts, groceries. For one wild moment, she wanted to sweep everything off the table. Instead, she grabbed her coat and went outside. Rain hit her face like thrown gravel. Mud sucked at her boots as she crossed into the orchard. Water ran between the rows, silver and fast, finding the same hard paths it always had. Her flashlight shook in her hand. She dropped to her knees in the first treated row and pulled back the straw. The soil beneath was dark and cool, but farther down, runoff had cut through 1 trench and exposed pale fish bones. That small failure became everything. Mr. Whitmore's warning, Mr. Hanley's questions, the laughter at the diner. Her father's empty chair, the developer's offer, the fact that she was 18, alone, and trying to save a farm older than she was. In the rain, she finally said what she had not said out loud since the funeral. She was scared. Scared the land was too tired. Scared the notes were too old. Scared she had mistaken memory for knowledge. Scared loving the farm had made her foolish. Then lightning flashed across the orchard, and for half a second every row turned white. In that flash, Emily saw the water. It rushed hardest through the bare soil. Where straw lay thick, it slowed. Where leaves had gathered, it spread. Where the amended trenches held, it sank in instead of running away. The orchard was not telling her to quit. It was telling her where to adjust. Emily ran to the barn, dragged out spoiled hay, packed it across the washout, laid fallen limbs along the slope, and marked weak spots with strips torn from feed sacks. Twice she slipped. Once she sat in the mud, too tired to stand. Then she remembered her father saying, "Panic wasted daylight, even in the dark." She got up. By dawn, the bills were still on the table. The roof still leaked. The bank still waited. But Emily was different. Fear had not left her. It had simply lost the right to steer. By late May, the first signs appeared. The mulched rows stayed cooler under afternoon heat. The soil held together in dark crumbs instead of falling away like dust. Earthworms appeared where there had been none. Leaves on the treated trees deepened from pale yellow-green to steady green. Emily did not celebrate. She measured, she wrote, she waited. Then June went dry. 1 week without rain became 2. 2 became 4. Ditches shrank to mud. Pastures turned brown. Dust hung over the roads long after trucks passed. By the 35th day, peach growers across the county were losing fruit. Young peaches dropped in bitter piles beneath the trees. Leaves curled. Pumps ran longer and pulled less. By the 53rd day, Mr. Whitmore called. If the crop failed, foreclosure would begin. Emily thanked him and hung up. Then she walked into heat that felt solid. In the treated rows, she knelt and pulled back the straw. The soil underneath was still cool. Not wet, not magic, but alive enough to hold what little moisture remained. The county heard before Emily told anyone. A packing house driver noticed the Carter trees still carrying fruit. A neighbor slowed by the fence and saw green where he expected brown. Mr. Hanley returned with his clipboard and no speech prepared. Emily showed him the untreated section first. The trees looked like the rest of the county, thin, stressed, dropping fruit to survive. Then she led him into the rows where fish bones, mulch, and compost had been buried. Those trees were holding. Their leaves were darker. Their fruit was smaller than a perfect year, but it clung firm to the branches. Mr. Hanley crouched, rubbed the soil between his fingers, and looked at Emily's row flags, notes, and sample results. The academic part of him still wanted clean trials. The field man in him could not ignore what stood in front of him. For once, he had nothing to correct. The drought lasted 62 days. When rain finally came, many orchards had already lost too much fruit to recover. Some growers picked what remained. Others left whole rows untouched because the peaches were too small to sell. At Carter Peach Farm, Emily walked the orchard after the storm and found fruit shining under wet leaves. Not every tree made it. The farm was not suddenly rich. The roof still leaked. The tractor still smoked. The bank still waited. But the orchard had survived. And when harvest came, it did more than survive. The peaches from the restored rows were heavy, fragrant, and firm. Their skins glowed deep gold and red. When the first packing house buyer tasted one, juice ran down his hand, and he looked across the orchard as if seeing the farm for the first time. He offered a premium for every crate Emily could bring in. She picked before sunrise and after sundown. She washed peaches in the old packing shed, sorted them by hand, packed them into boxes stamped Carter Peach Farm, and loaded the truck until its springs sagged. Word spread again. Only this time, the trucks slowing by the fence did not carry laughter. They carried silence. By the end of harvest, Most orchards in the area had lost nearly half their expected yield. Carter Peach Farm, working with old trees on tired land, produced the strongest recovery crop anyone could remember. On the restored acreage, Emily's yield broke the county record for a drought year peach harvest. She took the first major check to the bank herself. Mr. Whitmore counted the payment, checked the account, and folded his hands on the desk. He told her he had seen farms fail because people changed without understanding what they were changing. He said he had thought she was doing that. Then he slid the stamped receipt across the desk and said he hoped she would keep the place producing. It was not praise exactly, but it was respect. Mr. Hanley came back the next week with soil bags, a camera, and a different tone. He asked to document the orchard's recovery. Emily showed him everything, not because she wanted applause, but because other farms were hurting, and soil did not care who had laughed first. Neighbors began stopping by in the evenings. At first, they pretended to ask about peach prices. Then the real questions came. How deep had she buried the bones? How much straw had she used? Would it work for pecans, apples, or tired pasture? Emily answered plainly. She did not remind them of the diner. She did not mention the rubber fish on the mailbox. She did not repeat a single cruel thing they had said. That silence did more than anger ever could. That fall, after the last crates shipped and the bank account finally held enough to breathe, Emily repaired the kitchen roof, fixed the irrigation pump, and painted the old roadside stand white again. Then she took down her father's sign, sanded it smooth, and repainted the letters by hand. Carter Peach Farm. When she hung it back at the gate, the orchard behind her was quiet. The trees had lost their leaves for winter, but they no longer looked dead. Beneath them, under straw and darkening soil, the fish bones were slowly becoming part of the land. Not a miracle, not a trick, just patience turning waste into roots, roots into fruit, and fruit into another year. Emily stood there until the sun dropped behind the orchard. Then, with a small brush and steady hands, she added one line beneath her father's sign. Good soil remembers who cared for it. By the next spring, people no longer called Carter Peach Farm a lost cause. They called it the place where the girl saved an orchard with something everyone else had thrown away. But Emily never told the story that way. To her, she had not saved the farm by burying fish bones. She had saved it by listening when the land was quiet, trusting the pages her father left behind, doing the work no one respected until it worked, and staying when selling would have been easier. The laughter faded. The orchard remained. And every summer after that, when the first peaches ripened heavy on the branches, Emily Carter walked the rows before sunrise, pressed one hand to the living soil beneath the trees, and remembered that a farm's legacy was not kept by pride. It was kept by care.